holy neck, Batman! Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. Today I'm taking a look at the new DC Multiverse Detective Comics 27 Batman. And don't worry, we'll also be trying out some head swaps. Starting with the packaging, and while we have seen this box a million times, this time we're seeing something we've never seen before. A bright blue wrench. No. The cover of Detective Comics 27. It was 64 pages of action. Wait a minute, 64 pages of action? I read action comics for action. I want 64 pages of detective. Joking aside, this is the first appearance of Batman, and as of this recording, it's May, so what better opportunity than to take a look at this figure on Batman's 85th anniversary. Doesn't look a day over 40. Given that Action Comics 1 Superman was a collector edition, I'm pretty happy that this is a regular one, and if you want to try to find him in stores, here's the UPC. For packaging, I'm giving Detective Comics 27 Batman 5 points. Moving on to presentation, and at the top of his head, Batman stands at 7¼ inches, but the tips of his ears stands at 7½. Not surprisingly, this figure has a lot of reuse, but also does boast some very strategic new pieces. He's mostly just a combination of Year 2 and Hush. I'm singling out Year 2 in particular because they basically just shave the fins off of the arms. Also take special note of those hands because we're going to come back there, while the legs and boots are identical to Hush. The upper torso appears to come from the McFarlane Collector Edition Green Lantern Batman. There is engineering to accommodate the wired cape, so I don't know if just that collar piece is new or if the entire upper torso had to be resculpted. Either way, I'm not complaining about the reuse because it gives us consistent Batmans from across the years. Through this body, we have a pretty decent evolution of Batman's costumes, and I'd be totally happy with them using it to fill in the rest of the gaps. The challenge of this Batman is similar to the struggle that McFarlane had with Action Comics #1 Superman. By which I mean, what he looked like on the cover isn't exactly what he looked like in the issue. The interior's ears were shorter and stuck out of the sides of his head more like an actual bat, but let's be honest, this is closer to what most of us imagine when we think of Batman. The interior also has this larger round buckle capsule belt that the figure does a great job of capturing, whereas the cover has a more traditional belt, closer to what we see later on. The cover has blue gloves. Both the figure and the interior have purple. Love it or hate it, the interior of his cape being lined with purple in the Rebirth era is a callback to that. I've also seen reprints where the gloves have been recolored blue on the interior. What we're left with is kind of a mishmash of the cover and the interior artwork. In a way, I almost wish we had gotten two entirely separate figures. A more interior accurate Detective Comics 27 Batman with the short ears, the purple gloves, and the giant belt buckle, and a cover edition with the blue gloves, the regular belt, and the long ears. Though I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that McFarlane released a blue highlighted one as a Platinum Chase edition. Those Year 2 hands, by the way, that I told you to pay attention to for some reason are too loose and won't click into place. This leaves me with nothing left to talk about but the cape, and I have to admit I've been kinda back and forth on it. I didn't like it at first because it's a much stiffer, more crunchy fabric. At first, I also didn't love the fact that it was folded like a paper fan, but I've since turned around on that. The cape in the comic has very distinct seam lines, and this is honestly a very clever way of capturing that without having to sew anything. Additionally, the pleats create nice highlights and shadows for figure photography. Not only that, but because it's a lighter material, it does a great job of maintaining its shape. Suffice it to say, I went from being on the fence to absolutely loving it. In fact, for presentation, I'm giving this Batman 5 points. Moving on to posability, and although this figure does have a few new parts, this is a very common body, so we do know what to expect. This style of Batman's head articulation comes from a ball joint at the base of the neck, as opposed to the typical dumbbell joint at the base of the skull. Unfortunately, and as is often the case, he can't look up whatsoever. Additionally, it creates a gap that makes it look like his throat was slit. Hanging his head is no trouble, but that makes it look like he's dislocated a vertebrae in his neck. The range on the tilt is okay, though it does look a bit unnatural, but of course he can look all the way around. Moving down in the soft goods cape means that his arm is not hindered and he can get full range moving up. This of course is aided by the rotator cuffs. Moving down of course, and Batman has bicep swivel, and of course double jointed elbow. At the ends of the arms are McFarlane wrist balls that can swivel and hinge in any direction. Shifting to the torso, and Batman has a diaphragm joint and a dumbbell weight waist. Again, that soft goods cape means nothing's getting in the way of a good deep arch back, while the only thing getting in the way of a deep arch forward is poor engineering. He does, of course, get a really great amount of tilt and twist. Below the oversized utility belt, and Batman has the typical McFarlane hips. Not the highest kick in the world, but not bad. He does, however, have a perfect split. He also has a really good amount of twist in the hip, double jointed knee, toe articulation, and McFarlane ankles that can swivel, hinge, and like Batman's design from the cover to the interior, pivot. Of course, while the cape is posable, as I've said before, I don't consider it to be a point of articulation, and we'll be discussing it more in playability. Otherwise, he's held back only a little bit by the style of articulation in his neck and a less than 90-degree high kick. For posability, this Batman gets a still very respectable 4 points. Moving on to playability, and for me, that's where the real magic of this figure starts to happen. First things first, and of course we have our standard issue trading card and figure stand. It would have been a nice opportunity to have done a special write-up on Detective Comics 27 and its significance, but to McFarlane's credit, this is a different synopsis than I've seen before for Batman. Of course, he comes preloaded with these fists. He's also got the tried and true gesture hands we've seen so many times, but he also has these I surrender hands, and I gotta tell you, I really just don't like them. Not only are they just really flat and lifeless, they're also just really ugly. Even worse, none of the hands he comes with can hold an accessory, which is kind of a problem, because the coolest accessory he comes with is this bright blue wrench. It's the only tool he uses in the entire comic book, and it's pretty much only just for smashing through a glass bubble. The fact that somebody at McFarlane pored over that comic to find anything to use as an accessory is really cool, but if you can't hold the thing, what's the point? Some of you, of course, are wondering if the Riddler's bright purple hands can work. Unfortunately, and as with Year 2, they're just plain too loose. The real star of the show, of course, is the wired posable cape, and I've got to tell you, it's become my favorite cape option. Honestly, I'm really tempted to get another one of these to combine with the Keaton body and the Mezco head. But playability is more than just capes, accessories, or potential customs. It's also about how well your figure plays with others. Starting with some other Golden Age heroes, and we've got to bring out Superman from Action Comics #1. Since this Batman comes from the Hush school of scaling, he naturally towers over him. Otherwise, and for the Justice Society, here we have Alan Scott Green Lantern, the original Flash Jay Garrick in his very bright costume, and the McFarlane Collector Edition Platinum version of Hawkman. Come to think of it, in these colors, he's a pretty good match for Jay. We haven't gotten a classic comic book version of Dr. Fate, but for a couple of options, here's the one from Injustice 2, and the Pierce Brosnan version from the Black Adam movie. Though it's hardly a Golden Age version for one other Golden Age hero, and here we have Shazam. That said, and for a Golden Age villain, and here we have the Joker. This is the criminal version from the Three Jokers collection, which was modeled off of his first appearance. Robin made his debut 11 issues later in Detective Comics 38. Although Batman already looked a bit different at that point, I figured it would still be a good idea to bring him out. For a few other notable Batman figures whose heads I can't swap with, and here we have Arkham Knight. Next up is Rebirth, really highlighting the size difference between the two. On that note, and here's Frank Miller's era-defining Dark Knight Returns version, the more grounded and realistically Bermejo-inspired Page Punchers version, the colorful and deranged Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, and his recent look from the pages of Dark Detective. For a relative scale comparison, and here's Detective Comics 27 Batman with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. Of course, I know what you really want to see are some head swaps. Going in basic order of release, and here's the battle-damaged version of Dark Knight's Metal. Not quite sure what you would actually do with this, but here you go. Though I do think there's a conversation to be had about more realistic heads on this body. Other way around, and yikes. Holy neck, Batman. Next, and despite being pretty similar, and here's Batman Year 2, other than the ears, this one isn't really all that different from the one that came with it, but given how long I've wanted this particular head in black, that suits me just fine. For one that I'm sure a lot of you were curious about, and here we have Three Jokers. This right here is the reason why I've wanted a black version of the Year 2 head for so long. This currently represents the best long-eared black option for this body. Conversely, I don't see anybody wanting to do this combination exactly, but it's still useful, primarily to show you how the head would look with this cape. Personally, I think you could get away with it. Next up is the black and gray version of Hush. The idea of a long-eared Hush seems kind of strange, but for me, it looks a lot like the long Halloween. On the flip side, since Batman's ears were shorter inside of Detective Comics 27, this could be a possibility. Not quite accurate to what the mask looked like in the comic, but there's something there. For another one I'm sure some of you are curious about, and here's the Spawn 2-pack Batman. I like this combination a lot. If I wasn't already using my modified Hush 2-pack head for this body, I think this would be the combination I'd go with. Conversely, and just no. I've started to warm up to this head since it was pointed out to me that it's a pitch-perfect recreation of Troika Batman from the cover of 515, but that doesn't mean it works here. Next, and for the one I think some of you are probably the most excited for, and here we have JLA. If you wanted a comic-style Batman modeled off of the movies, this is your match. Since we've already seen the 3 Jokers head on the 27 body though, I'm not going to bother with the other way around. That said, and making its channel debut is my classic comic style black and gray custom. It combines the body from 3 Jokers with the trunks and belt from the Spawn 2-pack, with Hush providing the head, gloves, and boots. Because I had to shave the legs down to accommodate those boots, he's a little bit shorter. I think I do prefer the shorter ears, though the longer ears do feel classic and pair nicely with those long fins on the gloves. If you'd like to see a whole video about this custom, sound off in the comments. I love the cape, the head swap potential is great, and I'm very happy to be filling out the Golden Age display. The only thing holding him back is the inability to hold his accessory like a normal person instead of a weird balancing act. Docking him ever so slightly for the hand thing, and for playability, I'm giving this Batman 4 points. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. A solid figure, multiple accessories, and a phenomenal wired cape. I paid $23 on Big Bad Toy Store, and I'm very pleased with my purchase. Compared to the Target exclusive Cassandra Cain we just looked at, this has better accessories, a better likeness, and better availability. For price, I'm giving Detective Comics 27 Batman 5 points, averaging out to a grand total of 4.6 out of 5. Where does this Batman design rank for you, and what do you think of the wired cape so far? Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.